Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. Welcome back to the show. David Fradin joining us, the president at Spice Catalyst, based out of Los Gatos, California. He's here to talk more about his training and consulting, and of course, how he could be of service to you. Welcome to the show today. How are you?
I'm doing great. Glad to be with you.
Well, I'm glad to have you and excited to get started to talk to you all about Spice Catalyst. And yes, that's the website too. Go to spicecatalyst.com. And this is product management training, product marketing training. There's assessments, there's consulting, and so much more. You as a speaker, amazing. We have so much to get to know. And I don't know if we have all the time in the world to get to know you, but we're going to start today. So, David, first and foremost, please introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers today.
Well, I was born and raised in Detroit, Michigan, back in the 50s and 60s during the go-go years there.
Yeah.
Went to Cass Technical High School, which is an honors high school for the entire city, when Detroit used to have one of the best educational systems in the
Mm-hmm.
country. And got my private pilot's license, and then went into aerospace and later interdisciplinary engineering at the University of Michigan. In my freshman year, I was very disappointed that there was no flying club there. So I started a flying club called the University of Michigan Flyers. And
Wow.
they're still going now over 50 years later. And they've trained over 5,000 pilots. Many of them are airline captains around the world, including the head of the Blue Angels. And then in my sophomore year in college, my aerospace engineering professor, who was on Lyndon Johnson's SST Supersonic Transport Advisory Committee, which was having a lot of trouble getting funding from Congress as the first commercial airplane development
Wow.
outside the U.S. military. And he said that the SST was in trouble. Would I be interested in organizing a nationwide student organization in support of the SST? And not having any idea what I was getting into, I formed 40 chapters, 15,000 members on campuses throughout the country. And by the end of my sophomore year, I ended up testifying before Congress, the House and Senate Aeronautics and Astronautics committees, going to meetings in my pink polyester suit in the White House,
Wow.
things like that. And then after the SST was shot down by Congress, we felt that was very much because of a strong anti-technology feeling in the United States, which is hard to believe today.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Technology was being blamed in those days for the environmental problems that we felt we were going to have. And in reality, technology is nothing more than the organization of knowledge for practical purposes. So we changed the name from Fly America's SST or FAST, FASST, to Federation of Americans Supporting Science and Technology. And by the time I was in my junior year, I had a budget of over 100,000 a year and three people working for me as I was continuing to go to interdisciplinary engineering school at Michigan, and testified before Congress in favor of the space shuttle, testified on project independence with regard to energy, organized a National Energy Youth Council, National Space Youth Council, advised and lobbied Congress to build the space shuttle. We were successful on that. Lobbied Congress in
Wow.
favor of independence and weren't very successful on that. And
I
then when
thought
I
you
could,
working for Apple and for your history and you as an author was big enough. This is huge. I didn't know all this, David, and I did my research on you. Wow. Keep going. Keep going.
well, and then one time, for example, I got a letter from Arthur C. Clarke, the science fiction writer, and it was his short story book that led to 2001: A Space Odyssey. And he asked me if I was going to the scientific convention, the AAAS in New York City, and I was, since I was on their youth council. And he invited me to lunch at the press club in New York. And we had a good time talking about technology and the future of technology. He was credited for inventing the concept of a satellite for communications. And then I couldn't find a job when I graduated because nobody was hiring interdisciplinary engineers, which was a National Science Foundation
Mhm.
funded program to develop technically trained managers So I hired myself and moved my FAST headquarters to Washington, D.C., and continued to lobby Congress in support of science and technology and the other federal agencies.
Wow.
Then in 1975, I felt I couldn't be a student anymore since I graduated 2 years earlier. And the Environmental Balance Association of Minnesota recruited me to go there and be their executive vice president, which I did. And I helped pioneer the field of environmental mediation, that is, using mediation to resolve environmental, economic, and energy disputes. And I resolved the second successful environmental mediation in the world over an Anheuser-Busch Bolt plant proposed for Moorhead, Minnesota, the southern part of the Red River Valley, where malt and barley is grown for much of the beer in the
Uh-huh.
nation. And then I got heavily involved in what was at that time the largest environmental dispute in the history of the world over the reserve mining disposing of taconite tailings from their mining operations into Lake Superior. And I helped resolve that. And I was called by the Duluth News, the Henry Kissinger in northern Minnesota, for my shuttle of diplomacy between the corporate headquarters of Reserve in Cleveland and Congress in Washington, D.C., the White House, and the governor's office in St. Paul. And that dispute was finally resolved after 7 years of litigation. Around that time, Hewlett Packard contacted me
Yeah.
and they said, we understand you know how to site new facilities and we're having trouble, which was highly unusual for a socially aware and environmentally aware company like HP.
Mm-hmm.
So they moved me out to California to be in the corporate PR department,
Wow.
handled community relations for siting new facilities in Colorado, California, North Carolina, and in Seattle area. And one of the things I noticed in the HP PR department is that we did not have word processing, which is kind of strange for me because I had word processing dating back to my FAST days and through my environmental balance days. We always had word processing at the office. And I thought it was also strange that the corporate PR department at the time was the only department in the company that knew how to type.
Uh-huh.
So I introduced some internal word processing there, acting essentially as an internal product manager. So one of the nice things about HP is I could take those skill sets and move horizontally over to the information networks division in the office systems product management. Brought a couple products to market, and then Apple noticed me and they recruited me to take their new hard disk drive to market, the first hard disk drive on a
Wow.
computer.
What year was this, by the way?
That would be 1983.
Oh my goodness.
And the that hard disk drive is really cheap. It was only $3,500, and it was enormous in size. It contained 5 MB of space, which is about the amount of space we used up in about the first 30 seconds of this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So I brought that to market successfully, and senior management noticed that I knew how to manage. So they asked me to take over as the group product manager for the Apple III product line, which
Wow.
at the time was the office and business computer from Apple, building upon the Apple II's success. I
Mm-hmm.
did, and about a week into the job, Steve Jobs and the executive committee went off to Pajara Dunes in an off-site meeting, and they decided to cancel my product line without bothering to ask me or tell me. So about a week after that, I was coming out of corporate headquarters over on De Anza Boulevard, and Ida Cole, who was then the marketing director for the division I was in, ran out and grabbed me and said, John wants to meet with you. And I said, John who? And she said, John Scully. I says, oh, that's the president. I met him once or twice. So she ushered me into his little conference room, which also contained Joe Graziano, who was the chief financial officer, and Del Yoakum, later president of Apple. He was a VP of manufacturing. And Scully was sitting at the end of the table. He says, Dave, we've got a problem. And he's looking at a super VisiCalc spreadsheet. He says, we've got about $20 million in piece parts spread across the world in our manufacturing facilities. And, we canceled the product line. So what are we going to do about all this inventory? We just can't throw
Mm-hmm.
it away. And in today's dollars, that would have been about $200 million. And the company at the time, sales were about 600 million. So it would take a huge hit on the stock market.
Wow.
So John says, "What should we do about it?" I said, "What do you mean we, paleface?" And he didn't laugh. I said, "You never heard the joke?" He says, "No." I said, "Well, you're familiar with the TV show and the movies, The Lone Ranger." And he had he was dressed in white. He had one silver bullet. He wore a mask, rode a white horse called Trigger, and he had an Indian sidekick named Tato. And when I tell this story to Indians in India, I have to say an American Indian
Yes.
side.
Yes.
And they're surrounded by 10,000 yelling, screaming Indians on the Arizona desert. And the Lone Ranger turns to Tato and says, "Tonto, what should we do about this?" And Tonto, being an American Indian, says, "What do you mean, we, paleface?" I said, "You went down to Bahara Dunes and you canceled the product line. You've given me full responsibility for the product line,
Oh
including
my
now
gosh.
inventory.
Yeah.
Give me no authority.
Uh-huh.
Give me the authority to manage, market, and sell, service, support the product line. Will sell the $25,000 25,000 Apple IIIs we have in inventory and work out all of the supply excess and turn a profit." And he says, "How do you suggest we do that?" I said, "Make me an independent business unit manager and we'll do it." And I told him the story of my friend from Kelly Johnson for the Lockheed Skunk Works down in Southern California, and how he could come out with a high-tech airplane like the X1, the X-15, the XR-71 in 18 months, while the rest of Lockheed at the time, the bureaucracy was such it would take them 7 years. I told him the story of a soul of a new machine where Alpha General came out with a new mini computer because they put the development team alone and not interrupted by the corporate headquarters down in, they moved them to Raleigh, Durham, North Carolina. I told him the story of the IBM PC, which was also shut down by the senior salespeople at IBM because they were afraid
Wow.
of competition. And nobody in those days believed in cannibalizing your own products, your own product line. And that's one of the reasons that Steve was so insistent at that time to shut the product line down because he felt it was messing in the market that his beloved Macintosh might be able to get into.
Oh, got it. Got it. Okay.
So Scully agreed, and he says, "Make me a proposal." So I got 80 people to contribute information, use a core group of about 7 to 12 people. We wrote an 80-page business plan. And then on July 15th, 1983, presented that business plan to the executive committee and also compared the pros and cons and the profits and the return on investment analysis that anybody would do in a good business plan. We also compared it to Apple values. And at the time, Apple had a series of values that they had adopted a few years earlier, which covered things like empathy for our customers, achievement, positive social contribution, individual performance, team spirit, innovation, vision, individual growth, quality, excellence, and most importantly, good management.
Wow.
And it would not be good management to
Huh.
shut the product line down without giving people the opportunity to transition
Yeah.
someplace else. So at the end of my presentation, Floyd Kwame, who was there, who was at the time the executive vice president of sales and marketing for Apple, he says, "Dave, if a dealer called you and we decide after this meeting to shut the product line down, or we let you pick the option that you pick, which you
Yeah.
recommend, let the market decide." And the reason I picked that option is because when I was in aerospace engineering at Michigan, they flew us down in a charter plane to see the Apollo, I think it's 15
Oh
launch,
my
where
goodness.
all three astronauts were from University of Michigan. And after the launch, they took us by bus over to Disney World, which was under construction at the time. And they explained how they had to clean the water and have it flow around because it's usually a brackish swamp there. And they didn't want that in, what is that, Lake Disney in the middle of the park.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my fellow engineers said, "How did you guys decide where to put the sidewalks?" And everybody laughed. They thought that was a silly question. And the chief Imagineer, who was giving his presentation and answering our questions, he says, "Oh, that's not that funny. That's a very serious issue. We're building a major world-class theme park. We have to decide where to put the sidewalks." And
Oh.
what they did is they argued with each other, all 100 Imagineers. Disney calls them Imagineers, not engineers,
Yes, yes.
or where to put the sidewalks. And then finally, one of the junior Imagineers says, "Let's not put in any sidewalks." And I thought that was a blasphemy, build a major park without any sidewalks. So they decided to follow the young engineer's advice. They put in no sidewalks and planted grass everywhere. It just waited about 3 weeks to see where people are walking, and then they decided where to put in the sidewalks. Well, when I was writing my book about 5 years ago, building and sailing make great products, I was wondering what it looked like in Disney World in terms of the grass and sidewalks.
Yep.
I pulled up a whole bunch of pictures on Google, and there was no grass anywhere. Everything had been paved over because apparently everybody walks everywhere.
Yeah.
So back to Kwame asking me what would he says to me, "What would you say if we shut it down versus let the market decide?" I said, "If you let the market decide, I'd tell the dealer who called me that that's what we decided.
Yeah.
And it's up to him or her and us to continue to market, sell, service, support, and develop the product line. But if you decide to shut the product line down, I'll give the dealer your phone number, Floyd."
Oh my gosh.
And everybody laughed, and I didn't realize it at the time, but Ann Bowers, who is the VP of HR at Apple, she was also VP of HR at Intel at the time, was married to Bob Noyce, one of the founders of Intel. And Intel was very quick to pick up on Apple, or excuse me, on the HP way, which was
Mm-hmm.
P values. And that's why back in 78, 5 years before this meeting, the company developed and adopted a set of values, which is part of the reason for its continued success today. So everybody laughed, and about a week later, I got a call from Ken Zerbe, who is the executive vice president. And Ken says, "I hear you know a little about the Apple III. I'd like to make you the independent business unit manager. We'll give you 17 people and $4 million, which would be about $25 million today. You can sign for anything you want, up to $200,000, no questions asked, and go do it." So I said, "Okay." I said, "But you're not going to make me a general manager?" He says, "No, you're an independent business unit manager." I said, "So
Okay.
you're gonna call me a bum for short?"
Ah, the
So
smartest bum out there, but go ahead.
we went on and sold billions of dollars of the Apple III, created millions of dollars worth of profit,
God bless.
enough to keep about 1,000 to 15 highly paid Apple people employed, and also enough money to help pay for the development of the Macintosh. And then later, when Steve took over the Lisa and the Macintosh division, killed the Lisa, and his sales of the Mac in January 1985 dropped to 4 units. He was let go within 6 months.
Ah,
He went on to start his next computer company, which I called Last. And then he had difficulty with Pixar, and he finally sought out Dave Packard. I found in research for my book. And Dave explained to him that you got to be kind to people, you have to have empathy for your employees.
yeah.
You cannot be afraid to cannibalize your own products, because if you don't, someone else will. And
Yep.
he took lessons to heart when he came back to Apple in the late 90s and laid the groundwork for it being the most valuable company in the world today.
Wow.
So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
That is an amazing story. Well, we better have more shows together because this is just about your background and there's still so much more to get to know you. Oh my goodness. Okay. So congratulations on what a story. I just got to ask, do you still have your private pilot's license or did you upgrade to multi? What are you doing?
I've got a commercial pilot's license and flight instructor training.
God bless. I have 65 hours. I've soloed in my little Cessna 172. This is like 20 years ago. And I did my medical. I was supposed to cross country. I did my solos and then I stopped. So 20 years later, I still have all my books, my material, and it's my goal, it's my dream to get my license. And I got my captain's license instead, but it's now finances can't do it. I have two kids as a single mom, 7 and 9. So I juggle that. But my goal is to follow in your footsteps. I mean, wow.
I
Commercial
will
license?
Yeah, I worked at a super sub shop, which was a New Jersey style submarine sandwiches in Detroit. And I would have to work 9 hours to pay for 1 hour of flying.
Yeah.
So the ratios are huge. Of course, gas back then was about 43 cents a gallon for an airplane. Now
Now,
I think it's
yeah,
$5 or $6.
I can only imagine what it is cost to fly now. Oh my gosh, to get the license. But one day. But enough about me. David, I want to know more about you. So now here we are with Spice Catalyst. Okay, we're jumping the gun. I mean, as an author, we have to still talk about your book. Books, right? How many books do you have?
I've got three main ones. One is Building Insanely Great Products,
Uh-huh.
and I'll grab it here. I don't know if you can see it with the blue screen.
Yes. Hold on. There it is. Building insanely great products.
And it's on Amazon. And then I've
Okay.
got Organizing and Managing Insanely Great Products, which is for management. And
Mm-hmm.
then I've got this little pamphlet, which is only 976 pages long, and it's Successful Product Design and Management Toolkit that Wiley published, and it's used in executive MBA schools in India, Lovelace Professional University, and in IIPM, which I'm told is a very prestigious business school in India.
Is there anything you don't do? Now I also read that you have your own podcast. So, I mean,
Well, this one we're going to call Product Success Issues, which is a follow-on to the
yeah.
podcast I did before COVID of the same name. And what I plan to do with you in the next 9 episodes is to go through the 5 keys to product success, which is
Ah.
your product market strategy, which is the S in spice. The P is for deals with repeatable processes, so you don't have a culture of blame, which is the P in spice. I is information and having the information available to make informed decisions. And many times in my career, I never had any data or any information available to make an intelligent decision. And the C is perhaps the most important thing, and that is understanding your customer, what it is that your customer wants to do, when they want to do it, how they want to do it, where they want to do it, why
Mm-hmm.
they want to do it, what's standing in their way, and how important is it for them to get it done. So if you've come up with 15 things that people want to do for a product, and those are their unmet needs, then you know you're going to have a successful product. And then the
Wow.
last letter of the word spice, E, is the 130 competencies or skill sets that employees need to have in order for a company to have a successful product. Now, about 35% of all new products that are introduced each year fail in the marketplace, primarily because one or more of those 5 things of spice is not followed. And as a result, the world wastes upwards of $1 trillion a year in the development of new stuff that never creates a return on investment. So that's
Wow.
the things we'll talk about in the next 9
So
episodes.
that's the gist. But boy, oh boy, you as a mentor, as a speaker, as a professional, there's so much that you have to offer. I mean, let alone if you go to the website, everyone, spicecatalyst.com, you can check out, we'll talk more about your workshops, your events, your courses, and of course the books. But by the way, do you have any upcoming events that you do want to share with us?
No, I got nothing to do.
You got nothing to do. Where are you? Are you in California today?
I'm in California. Yeah.
God bless. Amazing, amazing. Well, we're excited to work together to get to know, more about you and how you're helping so many. And let me just ask about when you were younger, right? Did you always know you wanted to get in the world of aerospace, or how did that happen? Tell me a little bit about your backstory.
Well, I wanted to get into, well, one of the nice things is my mother asked me when I was about 9 years old, what do you
Yeah.
want to grow up? And at that time, I said electrical engineer. But then when I was 13, I joined the Civil Air Patrol and won a scholarship for 15 hours of flying. And they took me out to Reno State Air Force Base, and that's where I soloed after only about 6 hours. They probably put me out there in the desert because anybody that solos at 6 hours is a danger to the community.
I didn't even know that was legal.
And then I got my private pilot's license in about 43 hours.
Uh-huh.
Most of my students are at about 80 to 90 hours before I and they are confident enough to
I was
carry.
65 and then I blew it after I soloed. But yeah,
So that's quite normal. And then I thought the next step was to go into aeronautical engineering. And I applied for, and at the time, Michigan was one of the top 10 schools in the nation, and was admitted to the engineering school, which was not easy to get in. And then I found out it was aerospace engineering, and there was a side deal cut with Ohio State University, which had an aviation school. And they said, okay, Ohio State can focus on aviation and aeronautics. Michigan will focus on space. And I had very little interest in space because I was interested in aeronautics. So I told the story earlier when I was spending about a month out of every year in Washington, D.C., including during the school year. I took a thermodynamics course and made the mistake of sitting in the front row in the class at 8 a.m. So it didn't help that I slept through most of the course right in front of the professor. And I ended up getting a D, which meant that I would have to repeat that course. And I said I could care less about fluid flow around a sphere, which is part of thermodynamics. And that's the time when Cy Ramo from TRW convinced the National Science Foundation that we need more technically trained managers. So they formed this special course on interdisciplinary engineering. And I found that if I transferred into that, I could graduate and finally get the heck out of school, because after 16 years, it gets a little tiring, and go out into the work world. So that's what I did. So I was able to take courses in political science, economics, journalism, business administration, and so forth. Learned how to do surveys, learned how to organize, how to manage, and so forth. And that's what I ended up getting a degree in. But unfortunately, the dean of engineering refused to tell hiring companies that they had these technically trained managers. So nobody came onto campus for recruiting, saying, I'm looking for a technically trained manager. The only interview I got was to work on a typewriter for Honeywell or something like that, or
Oh my
a printer
goodness.
for Honeywell.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing all this. Unfortunately, we are out of time. It happened so quickly. So just a reminder, we'll be back on again next week. We're going to learn again those 5 ways to of product success, right? You mentioned Spice, hence the name Spice Catalyst. SpiceCatalyst.com. How else can we reach out to you?
Also, you can go through my website, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn, or you can send me an email to dave@spicecatalyst.com. And in the next episode, we'll talk about the 32 components of a successful product market strategy.
Wow. All right. Sounds like a plan. Thank you so much. Pleasure getting to meet you today, and congrats on all your success and making others successful with what you're doing. This is great. Hands-on interactive workshops. And again, he's here to help you and give you those fundamental skills that can help you succeed too. Thank you so much, David. Have a great day.
Glad to be with you. You too.
Same here. Thanks so much.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.